Evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2019 Grafton Selectmen's Candidate Debate. I'm your moderator this evening. My name is Bob DeToma. So we'll do some housekeeping to start off. I am an employee of the town of Grafton, assigned to Grafton Community Television, and this evening I am volunteering my time. I am not on the clock. In the interest of disclosure, I'm familiar with all three of the candidates that are seated here this evening. I'm happy to say that too, because I like them all. So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce the candidates. And to my immediate left is Mr. Peter Carlson. And seated in the middle is Mrs. Doreen DeFazio. And on the far right is Mr. Sargon Hanna, and he is the only incumbent. So at this time, we'll talk about the format and the rules. Each candidate is going to be given an opportunity to introduce themselves. They'll have 2 minutes to do so. Before the program came on this evening, we drew cards to see who was going to sit where. And Mr. Carlson drew the high card, so he is seated in the number 1 position. He will have the opportunity to answer the first question for the first round, and it will rotate throughout the evening. There are at least 6 rounds. If time permits, we will go for a 7th question. As I stated, the candidate who starts a round will also be given an opportunity to close the round with a rebuttal or the opportunity to refocus or contradict or even pass entirely. In the event that a candidate ignores a question and proceeds to challenge a fellow candidate, I will intervene and the question will be forfeited. And at the end of the final round, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to give their closing statements. And with that, hello, good evening. How are you?
Good evening.
Good evening.
So far, it was much smoother than last year.
It's early.
The opportunity to mess up is right around the corner over there. Well, thank you for all coming in. I hope you're ready. We're going to start with the first round, and the first question that goes with that round. We'll start with Mr. Carlson. And the question is, as a candidate, what do you believe are the 3 most important skills you need to bring to the position of selectman?
Thank you for that question, Bob. I believe that after researching this role, I've known about this role for quite a long time. That it's, I believe that I would bring an understanding of probably one of the biggest budget items in our community, which is the school budget. I think it's important that the board have someone on there who understands the technical aspects of what our school community means to us, but more importantly, just what does it cost to run it, and what are the implications of not having adequate funding. I think the second piece that I would that are important is just advocate for explaining our full capital liability in our town. So our capital projects in town, which involve replacement of fire trucks and DPW equipment. On top of that, replacing roofs, putting in repairs to the wear and tear of our assets, I think is something that is I can bring to this board pretty clearly. The last thing is that I've got a lot of experience on the school committee. I've had a lot of experience working with the TRICOM committee and other committees in town. I'm a pretty familiar face, and I understand the roles of the selectmen, and I would know right away from day one how to operate within the confines of a board of selectmen, and I know what the duties and responsibilities would be. So I would say from day one I would be able to get to work right away without any real learning curve. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. DeFazio, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. First of all, good evening. I want to say thank you to Bob and both the candidates here, both Peter for his work on the school committee and Sargon for his service on the board thus far. So getting into the questions, just quickly a little background about myself. So I have a master's in public administration. I work in local government for a local municipality right now. And so I also have a really good understanding of how local government works, how
Can I interrupt you for a moment?
Absolutely.
And I apologize.
That's okay. I'm trying to weave it all into 2 minutes.
You know, I think Peter jinxed me before the program started.
Sure thing.
We were supposed to do opening statements, and he predicted. I think you set me up. That's what I think.
All right.
Why don't you answer the question?
Absolutely.
And then when we get to the end where Sargon answers the question, we'll go back and we'll let you do introductions. How's that?
Sounds good.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay.
So I'm
Would you
gonna
like me to repeat the question?
Not at all. Thank you,
Okay,
Bob.
let me- hold on one second.
I'm going to sort of segue both, since that's where I've started here.
Okay.
So, so I grew up in town. I've been here since 1977. My dad actually was stationed at the Worcester Street State Police Barracks, and so that's how I found myself in Grafton. So I'm a lifelong resident, for what that's worth. My daughter graduated high school from Grafton High in 2012. And so now, you know, I have more time to serve my community. And I have this background. I'm actually qualified to be a town manager. I have my master's in public administration, like I said. So I bring a lot of knowledge and understanding of local government, a lot of passion for local government to my hometown. So with that being said, the three most important things that I think could be brought to the board, I actually would like to reframe the question and say, what does the town need me to bring to the position, more than what I need to bring to the position, because it is, you know, serving our constituents. And that would be, number one, a commitment to listen to all stakeholders and make sound decisions based on facts. So whatever is brought to the Board of Selectmen, that's how it should be handled. You know, like Peter kind of touched upon too, understanding of a budget and solutions to avoid an override. We want to keep, you know, all our citizens in this community. Again, I have parents who are retirement age. It's really important to me that all citizens have the services they need and, you know, can stay in this community that they love. And collaboration with a service mindset. And again, that's what I bring, working in local government. I think of this position as public service, and that's what I would bring to the board.
Okay, very good. Mr. Hanna, so you're the incumbent. What are the three most important skills you'll bring to the position?
Good evening, and thank you again, Bob, for having this. My name is Sargon Hanna. I'm the current chairman of the Board of Selectmen here in town. Three most important things that I believe I'll bring to the board. First is my experience and my institutional knowledge. I've been a elected official here in town since 2013, on the Board of Selectmen since 2016, and with that comes experience and knowledge of the goings-on in town. We always call it inside baseball, things that we know by being on these boards and committees, and just the way things are done on the inside. I would bring that back to the board for another 3 years if elected. Second is the ability to collaborate and work with others. I think when you're on a 5-person board, it's extremely important to be able to work alongside other people, even if you disagree or have different ideas of how to get to the same goal, because we're all here because we love this town. I think that's a given. And I think we're all here because we believe we can do the right thing for the town. And I think one of the most important attributes is being able to work alongside, reaching across the table, and getting to a decision. And I believe that's something I can do very well. And lastly, I'll bring my integrity. That's something I take, my reputation and integrity I take very personal, and I am very serious about it. You know, people don't always like what I say, how I say it, but it's me, 100% me. At the end of the day, you know that I'm telling you the truth, and it comes from my heart every single time. And you know, if I don't know something, I'll say I don't know something. And if I
10 seconds.
And if I do, then you know, you'll always get 100% me. So those are the three things I'll bring.
Okay. Mr. Carlson, you can either refocus or you can introduce yourself.
I agree with all my colleagues and about the qualities that are necessary to bring to the Board of Selectmen. I think all three of us, bring that unique characteristic to this election. I believe all of our municipal experience, and believe it or not, all three of us have worked together in some capacity in this town over the past 15 years, I may say.
Yeah.
So there is that breadth of knowledge that you have, and you're right, Sargon, we
On
have
the same committee.
On the same committee.
on the same
The three of
committee.
us were on CIPC at one
CIPC.
point.
That's right, we were. So anyway, so for my opening statement, I just want to introduce myself again. My name is Peter Carlson. I've had a family in town here. I have two wonderful children. I've got Alexis, who is my 5th grader, and I've got a son, Ryland, who is a 2nd grader here at Millbury Street Elementary School. My work experience spans mostly in the high-tech industry over the past 20 years. I've been Chief Technology Officer for one of the Central Mass's largest human services organization which involved management and day-to-day care for adolescent, adult, and senior citizens, as well as providing children with special needs educational services. Recently, I've taken a job here locally with Acuity Technologies, and one of the things I'm most proud of what I work at is I work with a majority of the municipalities in the area through the state for IT grants. For the past 10 years, I've been on the school committee. I've been chair for the past 2 years with another stint of chair a few years ago during the 2014 timeframe. But I also served on many other committees in this community that are government related. I've been on the Capital Improvement Planning Committee since its inception. I've also served on the Cable TV Oversight Committee, which is what you're seeing here tonight, is what the Cable TV Oversight Committee does, provides a studio like this for the community to use. I've also been on the Cable TV Licensing Committee for
10
both
seconds.
bringing in Verizon and Charter, Information Technology Committee, and the Personnel Advisory Committee.
Okay. All right, so we survived round one. All right, so we'll start round two. Mrs. DeFazio will lead off. And the question is, name 3 valuable resources that you will explore to increase the town's revenue.
Thank you, Bob. So the first thing I would say is I want to continue supporting the town's efforts in economic development and new growth in this community. You know, I know that we hired a part-time economic development coordinator within the past year or so, and that's one of the focuses on the town right now, to keep residential taxes where they are. So I am in favor of changing zoning laws to help support these new businesses coming to town. Secondly, I would be in support of looking at any sort of service fees on both the school and municipal side. Again, you know, I would come to the board with asking questions and you know, there's going to be some tough decisions as we try to avoid an override in the coming years. It's never an easy discussion to talk about service fees as well, but if that's one of the solutions that comes to the board, I would be in favor of talking about that. Third, I work as, like I said earlier, in sustainability, which I love, which is why I'm not pursuing a town manager role, because I really like the work that I'm doing in sustainability. And the town that I work for, the town of Sutton, next door, I've brought over $1 million in grant funding in less than 5 years to the town. And this is an opportunity that Grafton is just starting to take advantage of. So not only do we have this $1 million in grant funding, but we've been able to, in Sutton, lower our costs about 30%, which is huge, in our energy sources. So for example, the entire school complex in Sutton does not pay any energy bills.
10 seconds.
The LED streetlights have lowered costs 70%, and those are the type of things that I would want to bring to Grafton.
Mr. Hanna, you're up.
So I agree with a lot of what Doreen said, and my answers might mimic that as well. But you know, number one, the economic development. We talk about economic development. 3 years ago when I ran, I said that my goal would be to help bolster that. In the last 3 years, we've received a $500,000 grant from MassWorks to help infrastructure on Route 30. UPS has bought a piece of land for $18 million and to build a 800,000 square foot facility to create thousands of jobs. We have a part-time economic development coordinator to help with our economic development for the future. And those are just small things that we have done in the last 3 years, and I'm hoping to piggyback on, because I'm still not satisfied. I want to see this town grow and grow. Second, obviously with increasing of fees, we could always talk about that, and that might make a little small dent, but it is a revenue source. Sustainability is another one that you can make another small dent. Wouldn't be opposed to talking about overrides and coming to the table with solutions to help progress this town. I think the second that we move backwards, it's a detriment to everybody in this town. And if it means that we all have to pitch in a little bit extra to help move this town forward, then I'm all for that too, and I would support that. So, in long term, we really need to get after our Beacon Hill and look at that state aid formula for Chapter 70. So that's where I am with those three resources for increasing town revenue.
Thank you. Mr. Carlson, your turn.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I too agree with my colleagues here that economic development needs to be a top priority for Grafton, and whether that means welcoming in new types of businesses. We've seen the other day cannabis host agreements were signed by the Board of Selectmen. I know this is a very controversial area, but this is a source of revenue for Grafton. I also wanted to point out too that back in 2014, Grafton was supposed to have economic development in full force because we wanted to forestall the potential for another override in 5 to 6 years. And really, what we've seen is that in the past few months, or actually past year, we've seen some activity with a part-time economic development coordinator. We have $6 million of undeveloped commercial property in this town, and I believe that this should be the town's top priority to get that property developed so it offsets the burden of local tax base against the residents. I do also believe grants plays a huge role in this, and I know Doreen has been a fantastic asset to towns like Sutton. Grafton has always talked about getting a full-time grant writer, and I think it's time that we invest in that. It may take some time for those grants to come in, but I do believe that the long-term payoff in having someone here dedicated writing grants for Grafton will be beneficial for the whole community. I also believe another source of revenue, and I agree with Mr. Sargon on this one, is that we need to be having a more active role as Board of Selectmen in local aid. And I know we talked about Chapter 70, but it's also talking about Chapter 90, Chapter 78 for schools, and being a more proponent for Beacon Hill to hear, not only from our community, but also partnering with our neighbor communities. We need to have one voice in stating that we can't wait any longer for Chapter 70 to come in. We need it to happen sooner rather than later. So those are the few places that I think we can see some revenue. I agree with some of my colleagues here that it's nothing new. Grafton has been talking about
10
this for a long
seconds.
time.
All right, Mrs. DeFazio, you can put a finer point on it if you choose.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Okay. 2 rounds down, moving on to round number 3. And Mr. Hanner, you're going to begin the round. How will you engage and motivate citizens to become more active in town government?
Well, look, I became personally, I can always go off my own personal experience, I became involved in town government because I found the planning department and the planning board difficult to deal with when I had an application in front of them back in 2011. And I felt like I could do a better job, or I could do a good job, and I really should just try to apply myself to that instead of just complaining in the background. So I joined as an associate member, and I felt, learned so much, and I understood how difficult that job really is. And I learned a lot, but I also was able to bring my perspective to the table, which was coming from the other side of the table and being able to understand the applicants and dealing with the applicants in a different way than the board had done previously. And I just fell in love with serving our town. After planning, I had a few mentors tell me that they could see me on the Board of Selectmen and they believed I could do a good job. And they motivated me to run, and I ran and I won, and I'm here 3 years later running again. So I believe having mentors and mentoring people to tell them, hey, you can do this, and jump in, and motivating them to get involved is huge, and that's how I would do that. And again, being a mentor doesn't mean you would think identically to that person or grooming them to be your twin or your clone. No, it's the opposite. It's coming in because they could bring in a fresh set, a new brain, a new way of thinking, and just passion to help this town. I don't think, I think this town has become very polarized and egocentric, and we need to stop being so negative and quick to place blame, and because it demotivates
10
people.
seconds.
I think if you're too negative, I think nobody's going to want to come to the table. So I think you just got to be positive and let people know that they can help.
Thank you. I think you have to have a certain amount of ego to sit here under these hot lights, don't you?
Oh, and it is hot though.
I don't know what you're talking about, Bob.
You don't know? All right, Mr. Carlson, you're up, please.
Thank you for that question. How will I engage and motivate citizens to become more active in town government? It's what I've been doing ever since I've started my involvement in town government, is just be inclusive, be welcoming. be understanding, and really, tell people, don't be afraid to step up. We started all at the same place. We started our first time, whether it be on some ad hoc committee or whether it be on planning board or CIPC, whatever it is, something that you're really having a passion about. I think as us as town leaders, we need to encourage that. If we don't get new people involved in town government, then what happens is that things stay the same way, and it's very hard to bring in new ideas. So what you see is that with that encouragement, you see inclusivity, and with that inclusivity, I believe you have really good positive outcomes. And to Sargon's point, that you have some discourse. I think it's okay to disagree with your members. I think it's okay to have a disagreement about a policy or a plan or an idea. I think what really makes it important for people to understand is having an understanding that it's not personal. It's just the way people are, and maybe you get another chance at it, and you might bring up the issue again, and maybe you can advocate maybe a little bit differently and have a more positive outcome. But I do believe that with that inclusivity and that welcoming, that's how you get more people engaged in our town government.
All right, thank you. Mrs. DeFazio, your turn.
Thank you. So my personal story of how I became an engaged citizen here is I started on the recycling committee in 2007, and the town did not have a recycling committee. And it was, sort of the question, why aren't we recycling yet? At a time when, we needed to. And, so we got a committee together, talked to a Board of Selectmen member, got a committee together and started that. And, like my two colleagues are saying, once you feel inclusive and once you feel like you have a voice, I feel like, you just continue down this path. However, I also understand that people are busy and not everyone is like us and wants to sit under these bright white lights and be in a debate and, run for public office. And I can appreciate that too. So if I'm elected to the board, one of the things I'd want to do is hold office hours. And once a month, sit in a public place in town and a couple hours every month and let people know this is where I'm going to be, the Polish Hall, Pepperoni Express, wherever it is, very similar to how we're running our campaign, and listen to people. And people who don't have time to sit on a committee because they're working, they're raising families, but they have something to say. And then the other thing is I'd actually encourage more public meetings. There's a lot of big issues that are coming before the board and coming before committees, and Sargon mentioned, inside baseball, and for people like us who really love it and want to engage in it is one thing, but sometimes there's just one particular issue that people want to talk about, and really the only outlet right now is online. And I feel like if we had more engagement in public meetings and office hours, that we can kind of bring some really good ideas and solutions to light.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hanna, your turn.
I think between myself and Peter and Doreen, I think we pretty much covered this issue. So I don't think we have to say it anymore.
Quit while you're ahead. Moving on to the fourth round. How's everybody doing? We should stop and take a breather. Everybody's okay?
Oh yeah,
We're good.
Good,
It is,
yeah.
it is 100 degrees, but
Yeah.
We want
I
to
like it,
make sure
actually.
we advertise that fact all night long.
The people need to know how we do under the pressure.
Under
Right,
the pressure of
right.
the hot lights. That's
Live
right.
TV and hot lights. We're doing great.
Okay. All right, so we're moving into the fourth round of questions, and Mr. Carlson's going to begin the round. And when you are elected, what do you believe is the first issue the Board of Selectmen must address?
Thank you for that question, Bob. I think a lot of people may know that Grafton is facing another financial cliff with the reduction in available revenue for the town. I believe our finances is first and foremost something that I think the Board of Selectmen need to tackle with the next, after this next election cycle. People, I'm sure, may be aware that we're going to be over $1 million deficit just running with level services next year. I think that's a real significant deficit that requires a lot of difficult conversations. And to my colleague's point, I believe that we try to avoid overrides as much as possible, but unfortunately, with the way the timing and the state aid is coming in and other economically developed projects with the UPS, they're not going to come in on time. So the town has to ask itself a really important question. I believe that the Board of Selectmen have an obligation to ask the town what does it really want to do ultimately at the next town election. and determine if it wants to continue funding things level services, or are we going to have to make some significant cuts with some significant consequences as a result. And I'm not quite sure if the town will ever recover from those types of cuts. So I think finances would be the first and foremost topic that we would have to tackle. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Mrs. DeFazio, your turn.
Thank you, Bob. I agree with everything Peter's saying. However, in my answer, I'm going to take one step back from that. And I think the first issue as a board that needs to be addressed is the formality and collaboration and working effectively as one unit. So I know that back in the day, probably again about a decade ago or so, the Board of Selectmen had workshops on their off meeting weeks to help kind of bring solutions and ideas to the board. And I really think that needs to happen again. I think that all issues that need to be addressed, these budget issues that are very important that Peter's talking about and I 100% agree with, I think the board needs to have a strong foundation and an understanding of its role. And again, I've said it before, I'll say it again, none of us come to the table with all the answers. And I think this could only enhance our opportunity to serve our board as a board more effectively. The second thing is, I know that there's goals meetings for the town administrator, and to my knowledge, there's not a goals meeting for the Board of Selectmen. And to really sit down as a team building group and determine what are our policy goals here? What are our goals as a collaborative group and a board? And so those are, I think the first issues that need to be addressed in order for everybody to do their job the most effectively and have a solid foundation as we go in to tackle some of these issues that are coming down the line. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Hanna, please.
So every year our budget needs to be balanced, and the first issue that I want to tackle if I get reelected is we need to talk about what's that going to look like a year from now. And I believe that Grafton is at a crossroads here. As Peter had mentioned, we have a deficit that's looming, and we have to ask, because we are just, when we're elected, we're agents of the town, right? We're here to service the townspeople. And we could propose initiatives and put things on the table, but if it gets voted down at town meeting and it's the town's wish, then it's up to the town really in what direction they want to take the town. And us as the leaders, we could show them where we want to take it, what we think. But also I think the question has to be asked is what kind of town do we want moving forward? I don't think there's enough cuts to be made, personally, in order to have have the type of town that people are expecting. We, as a town, have many needs and services that we offer, and in order to keep those going, I truly believe that we will have to talk and ask some hard questions about passing overrides. And at the end of the day, that will be the first issue that I want to tackle on the board if re-elected. And again, if you can't get blood from a stone. There's only so much money to be made, only so much, no immediate revenue fix. Cuts have to happen, and I don't think there's enough cuts to be made. So I think that's the first issue, and I think that's the first question we have to ask the townspeople. And that's the first proposal that we have to propose to people. This is what we need, this is what we have to do. So.
Thank you. Mr. Carlson, anything you want to add to the discussion?
I just want to thank both the colleagues. I think they both said some really great points tonight, and I want to emphasize Doreen's comments about collaboration. That, I think, is the only way that the selectmen are going to be able to get through the next year, and I think that's going to take, to your point, I think that's going to take some effort on whoever's going to be elected onto this board in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Okay. I want to take the opportunity to say that we are blowing right through this program. So before we went on the air, we talked about, well, why not an hour and a half? Why an hour? And we're looking at this, we're going to have to tell jokes when we get to when we get to round
We'll,
6
we'll
and
have
7.
some bloopers at the end.
We'll
for
have a
you,
blooper
okay?
roll. I want to commend all of you for getting your points across in such a clear and concise manner. And yeah, and we're really going to put your thinking caps on. I'm going to have to fill maybe 20 minutes, ladies.
Well, if you got more questions, you know, you could throw some on the spot ones, maybe.
Yeah, if I can just come up with questions on, you know, just throw them out there and they'll be unfiltered and, yeah, that's not good. We don't want to do that.
or we can just really lengthen the next couple of questions
Yeah.
for you.
No, you can just slow the pace down.
Sure.
For those of you that might just be tuning in, this is how we're going to delay. For those of you that might be tuning in just now, you're watching the 2019 Grafton Candidates for Selectmen debate. And I'll take the opportunity to introduce the candidates again. To my far left is Mr. Peter Carlson, and seated in the center position is Mrs. Doreen DeFazio, and seated on the far right is Mr. Sargon Hanna. And that took up a whole 15, 20 seconds. Okay, we're going into the 5th round, and Mrs. DeFazio is going to start. And the question is, what new role should Grafton Community Television play to inform Grafton's citizens about their local government?
Thank you. So first of all, I'll preface by saying thank you for all the work GCTV has done so far. And, you know, you guys, even, you know, case in point, holding this debate tonight is great. I think that the ability to have more information out there in the community, like maybe some how-to videos. So if people, you know, think about similar to when you Google or a YouTube video or something, how do I go submit a building permit? Or, you know, how do I find out how to get involved in a committee? Or how to run for public office? I think there's opportunity to have people engaged, again, online, and kind of short interviews on how to do things, and also very informational. I will also say that, like it or not, social media plays a big role, and I know that you know, GCTV is on social media. I believe it's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, if I'm not mistaken. And as I've been around town talking to people in the campaign, I mentioned my daughter's 24, so I've had some really great conversations with some young folks in town and have thought about them, and you know, they're smart, they're engaged in this community, and I'm too old to know what the heck type of social media outlet they use nowadays. But I think any opportunity to engage younger people in our community, I think there's that gap in demographics post-high school and before old people, sorry friends, that you know, we could
10 seconds.
you know, sort of hear from them as well.
Excuse me. Mr. Hanna, please.
So when I first saw this question, I said I thought this might be a shameless plug for GCTV. But I thought
Well,
long
do you
and
want
hard-
the answer to that? Yeah, we ran out of questions, so we had to throw in a gimme. So.
I thought about it long and hard, actually, because I do think that you guys do play a very important role. I think the on-demand feature that you have for all the meetings is huge. If you miss a meeting, it's so easy to just go online and track it and find it. So I think that's great and wonderful. I also think that you know, maybe having more engagement on social media. You know, if you ever can go live with the meetings on a Facebook page, or you know, that might actually, now you have the online streaming, and then you have online commenting as well, or even on Twitter, people will live tweet like when Game of Thrones is on, and you know, it's like you're watching it with everybody, and you're not at home watching it by yourself. Other things, I just thought about specific type of programming. I think having like a meet your own local town official, informal interviews for people in town to meet the officials so they know who the person is, if they haven't already, and maybe get an understanding of where the person comes from, his experience, all that fun stuff. A quarterly select person roundtable. So, you know, maybe you take 2 members of the Board of Selectmen and you kind of just have like a roundtable discussion, very informal, and kind of talking about town issues at hand. You know, maybe the trash bags, or maybe this change of from selectmen to select board, you know, stuff like that, those type of issues. And it could be really fun and enlightening and just informative. And also maybe a show highlighting all the upcoming events, municipal community, similar to like the old column in the Grafton News, A Walk Down the Road, something you can tune into on a
10
Sunday night
seconds?
and to see what's ahead in the week, sort of like Chronicle for the town of Grafton every week. So those were my ideas.
Whenever
Okay,
I hear
we
that,
got
I have
it.
to pull the stuff out of the oven for my wife and for my kids. So I just had that one moment of.
All right, Mr. Carlson, please.
Thank you for that question. As some of you may be aware, I've been a big proponent of Grafton Community Television for many, many years. I'm a producer here, not very active producing. But one of the things I think that, and I agree with both of you in your statements about how to utilize this wonderful asset that our town has, which is brought to us by cable TV licensing from both Charter and Verizon. I had an idea. And one of them is when people wanted to see like a specific part of a meeting, okay? They don't want to go through the full 2-hour meeting or 2.5 hour, however long the meetings are. And having an indexing of when certain agenda items occur. Now I know it takes discipline from the boards and the chair to, you know, make sure you stay with that agenda, but allow people to click on those components that they want to get to and jump to right away and not have to, you know, fast forward. So if they're on the train and they want to catch like, oh my God, there's a development going on over my neighborhood, I want to catch the selectmen, I want to hear what they had to say, and they can just jump right to that part. And I think that it would take some time and effort. I know Bob's over there going, okay. My mic's going to cut out in 2 seconds. But the idea of being able to make it convenient for people to not only hear what's going on these meetings, more importantly to your points on having how-to videos about how do you do business in Grafton, what does the clerk's office do, what does the accountant's office do, I think that just opens up more opportunity for maybe people going back to that first question, how do you get citizens to really engage within our community? Then they can see, and that way it's not a mystery for them. And it's easier to point somebody to some of these things. So for example, someone asked me, hey, what was the later start times all about at the last school committee meeting? I can send them a link right to the Grafton Community Television website with the meeting and the link saying, here you go. The first 45 minutes is what we discussed, and then after that was general business. So
10 seconds.
it would be, I think, a really great asset to the town to be able to have that capability. Sorry, Bob, but
No.
that's it.
We'll have a discussion. Mrs. DeFazio, do you have anything to add? Say yes.
Okay, yes. So I agree with both my colleagues, and you know, I like the fact, I guess just to add a little more time to this too, I feel like, you know, all three of us as candidates and Peter just made this example bring different skill sets to the board. So with his technical background, it doesn't surprise me at all that he brings this up, which is great. You know, Sargon with economic development planning and his experience on the board, owning a restaurant in town, me with my sustainability background and you know, interest in work in local government. And so I have nothing to add to what people say, but I just have to say that I feel like very grateful that the town of Grafton has 3 really good candidates to choose from this time around. And that doesn't mean that one of the votes shouldn't go to me, but you know, this has been a really great discussion so far. So thank you.
Okay. So baby steps. So one of the things that we've started doing is the lower thirds on planning board meetings and board of selectmen meetings. Viewers at home can see what the topic of the discussion is. Now, it's not exactly an electronic jump forward, but you do have the ability to kind of scroll through the video, find the topic you're looking for, assuming you have an agenda in front of you. So baby steps, but yeah, eventually we would try to put in the metadata so that folks that are, like you said, on the train or sitting at home can just, because we all want to do it, just get to the point and get it over with. So, and I'm sorry, go
If
ahead.
you don't mind, if my colleagues don't mind, I just wanted to mention that we are the subject tonight, not of a blog, but of live watch parties on Facebook, from what I understand.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to do that, Bob.
No, not at all.
But
That's okay.
when I heard about that, I was like, what do you mean we're going to be the subject of a live what? What's a Facebook watch party? What is that? So I do think that the adaptability, you know, the adoption of technology, I think is going to be crucial, I think, to, you know, get the word out some more.
Agree.
I just wanted to
Agree.
throw that out there. Sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't mean to go out.
Right.
Sorry.
And then to jump off on what Mr. Hanna said about shameless self-promotion, we have a number of times been able to view the government programming from some of the surrounding towns. And I hope you're all proud of the fact that we are, without a doubt, the best-looking group on television. I'll tell you that right now. I've actually had people call me from out of town to tell me they just watched a school committee meeting or a planning board meeting, and the gentleman on the phone told me, "You guys are doing it right. You guys are head and shoulders above all the surrounding towns." This is a gentleman from out of town. So I'm proud to say that events like this and the work that we do around town is very meaningful. And then to be a resident in town and not know anything about town government and have all of this information kind of soak in at different meetings in town, it's really been beneficial. All right, so we have completed the 5th round, and we're going to enter to the 6th round. And Mr. Hanna is going to begin the round here. And the question is, what do you believe will be the 2 most difficult tasks that you will face as a selectman in the coming year, and how will you approach them?
So the first answer would be, I think obviously our finances. It's a big problem, and fixing our revenue problem, and the solution around that needs to be taken into consideration with all members in this town. And I think it's a real big one. Another thing, I think unifying our town and unifying our boards and being able to come to a consensus. I think optics are everything, and when we're asking for, if we're going to be asking the town for an override, or asking them to make big changes in our budget, I think having a board that could be unified, that could work together well, and having us all on the same page, I think goes a long way. And I think that goes the same with the school committee, same with the finance committee, same with the planning board, same with all the committees in town. And then it also goes, and it doesn't mean that we all have to agree, but I think respect is a huge thing, and I think that needs to be worked on. And so I think that's a huge difficult task in this upcoming year, because this year could make or break this town, in my opinion. And I think we could really see some difficult decisions having to be made. And if we were all on the same page, I think it would make it a lot easier. So.
Okay. Mr. Carlson, please.
All right, thank you for that question. What do I believe are the 2 most difficult tasks as a selectman in the coming year, and how do we approach them? I do agree with Mr. Hanna that our finances is paramount. That is going to be a very difficult task to overcome and talk about. There are very few options available, and I think that that's going to be difficult by asking what those options are to the community. That's going to be one difficult task. What's even going to be a more difficult task is that if we don't get that revenue, if we don't get the financing fix, is what is it that gets cut? What does that mean to us as a community? What effects does that have on us today, and how long will that last for years to come, if it does? I think those are 2 very difficult tasks that the selectmen have to accomplish next year, for sure. And I don't think there's any easy answer. And I don't think there's answers that people like to hear. I think it's the truth. It's what the facts are laid out. This is what our community is made up of, and I think as a board, we not only need to work together, but we have to be more inclusive than ever before. And I think that that's going to be the difficult task that we have going ahead.
Thank you. Excuse me. Mrs. DeFazio.
Thank you, Bob. Do you mind repeating the question one
Not
more
at all.
time, please? Thank you.
This is the 6th round, and the question is, what do you believe will be the 2 most difficult tasks for you as a selectman in the coming year, and how will you approach them?
Thank you. So I, again, agree with my colleagues. I mean, I think the biggest issue at hand is our budget, and coming up with some solutions that are going to incorporate some trade-offs, whether we like it or not, in order to avoid an override. And I think that's the common goal of the board, and it's also the common goal of the town. So like I said, I agree with what they both said. I think adding to our budget, we also have growing capital items coming up in the next 5 years, and I think we need to take a look inclusive with the budget is how we're running our capital plan. You know, do we do a stabilization fund? Do we, you know, realign how we're handling our capital projects? I think that has to be addressed as well. The second issue that I think is a sensitive issue is the fire department, and you know, working through that process with minimal disruption. And you know, I mentioned in the beginning, my dad was a first responder working for the state police, and I have a lot of respect for the fire department, police department here in town. And you know, I understand and appreciate that fire department as we speak, and will continue to be a brotherhood. And it's they have worked and been first responders for our town for generations. And now we're looking at impacting this department and really changing it with looks at a full-time chief and possibly full-time staff, which this town desperately needs. But it's a sensitive issue that is going to need to be minimally disruptive, which is going to take a lot of time and effort from a lot of people in this community, including the Board of Selectmen. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Mr. Hannah, do you have anything to add to the discussion?
No, it's funny. I was preparing for that, and Doreen took the words out of my mouth, because I was going to say another thing to add is this fire department staffing study. We created the commission to go and take a look at that, and it's comprised of a lot of firefighters in town and volunteers. That is going to be a big change for our town if we end up incorporating that study and making that our reality. And that, along with our capital, I think those are two other issues that are on the horizon, and we need to incorporate all of that. So, you know, there's what do you believe will be the two most difficult tasks? I mean, there's there's a lot of them, Bob. There's more than two, and it's just
It's your choice.
It's going to be a tough 3 years ahead, and but I think I'm very confident that we can get this board on the right, or the select board on the right track, and I think we can get the town on the right track, and I think we can get I think we can get to the right place, because we all love this town, and we all going to believe in this town, and we believe we know where this town could go. So I think we can handle it.
Thank you. All right, that's the end of the 6th round, and we will be entering the 7th round, which will be the final question. And then you will all have the opportunity to do your closing statements. So we're almost there, in the home stretch. All right, round number 7. Excuse me. Mr. Carlson, you're going to answer the question first. What do you hope to accomplish in year 1, 2, or 3? 1, 2, and 3, and are you going to give your joke answer?
I'm not going to give my humorous answer that I mentioned earlier today.
I swear I was going to say it.
That'll be for bloopers.
That will be for the
That'll be
blooper
the
scenes,
blooper.
right. In the first year, there's a lot of things that I would like to accomplish. In the first year, I would like to see us address our public safety situation with the fire department. I believe that we have the right mechanisms in place today. I attended the Board of Selectmen meeting on Tuesday, and I saw some very eager and very intelligent people who want to step up and volunteer their time yet again, and I believe that's a good sign of the inclusiveness about how to solve this long-term issues that we have that were outlined in the report. The second part that I'd like to do in year 2 is, I would really love to see us build some affordable housing. I mean, this has been a hot topic in Grafton for a couple of years. There's been contentions on both the Affordable Housing Trust and with the Board of Selectmen. I believe it's time that we utilize the money that we have set aside in our Affordable Housing Trust, and we identify some parcels in Grafton and make a decision and start addressing our affordable housing needs. That is crucial to me. It's near and dear to my heart. And last but not least, in year 3, I would really like to make sure that UPS is on track. I would like to see that permit come in. I would really like to do whatever it takes to work with them or any other organization or company to be welcoming in Grafton. I would like to see this inclusiveness, and maybe Grafton Community Television is going to play even a bigger role in that to attract future developers and investors in our town. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. DeFazio, please proceed.
Thank you. In the coming years, if elected to the board, I would try to avoid overrides if feasible. That would be probably number one, is dealing with our budget issues. Also attracting businesses to town, again, like Peter has mentioned, working with UPS, working with economic development, planning, and trying to attract business to town. Again, kind of incorporating more public meetings if necessary. And this also includes continuing the beautification of our town and the preservation on our town. There's a warrant article coming up at town meeting next week. And I think, we live in a really special community that has a lot of historic character too. So I think this is all something that is all inclusive and we need to think about. Again, my expertise in sustainability, I would like to see Grafton become a more sustainable community, not just to lower carbon emissions, but I think it's a huge opportunity that we're missing right now in order to lower costs. Another issue that I would want to talk about is the increased traffic and walkability in this town. And I know it's not, we have a laundry list of things that are really important to discuss, but there's been efforts in town for children to walk to school in the past couple years, and I know that we're working toward building sidewalks near Millbury Street School, for example, thanks to the school committee and their efforts. But I think we need improvement on this. I happen to live on a road with an elementary school and see children taking their life in their hands, walking down with 60-mile-an-hour cars. As we increase economic development, we're
10
also
seconds.
increasing traffic, and it's something that needs to be done. Also, the fire department study is very important to me. It was my capstone project during my master's degree, and it's something near and dear to my
And
heart.
that's
Thank
time,
you.
so I'll interrupt you there. Ah,
This is how we're stretching it.
yeah, no, this is called Where Did the Clock Go?
Having Bob shut off his phone.
10 minutes, there we go. All right, we're back, okay. Mr. Hanna, please proceed.
So year one, I think is probably the most important year, this year coming up. So kind of reiterating what I've already said, but I think unifying our board and coming together as a cohesive unit, and putting together forth a plan for our finances for this fiscal year, I think is extremely important, and that's what I'd love to accomplish, because I feel like if we can accomplish that in year one, then in year two and year three we can start focusing on broader issues and other issues in town. Again, when I ran 3 years ago, I talked about economic development. I'm running again this year. That is still my passion. That's still what I bring to the table. That's my strong suit, and those are things that I want to accomplish in year 2 and 3. We're talking the economic growth around Route 30, 40R Afonso property over there on Route 30, off of Institute Road, the old State Hospital, revitalization of that mill in South Grafton, seeing if we can help him get that mill back to what it was, and work on the Bolac property in North Grafton. The more attractive we can make the exit off the Mass Pike, the more we can make Grafton a destination. Work with Tufts to either have that land in the science park utilized or review options to have it reclassified for sale if the concept of a long-term lease is not working. Development of the land by Wyman Gordon. Continue to work with UPS to try to get them to start breaking ground sooner rather than later. And this morning we were at a housing choice legislation program, and one of those is one of the main points was talking about having enough housing supply for the increase in employed individuals here in Grafton.
10
And so
seconds.
affordable housing and housing in general, I think, is very important and something that we need to really think strongly about.
Okay. Mr. Carlson, if you don't have anything to add to the discussion, I will ask you to do your closing statement.
I don't have anything to add. I think, I don't.
Okay, then please proceed.
Bob, thank you very much for hosting this event tonight, and thank you to the wonderful staff here at Grafton Community Television here in South Grafton. Again, for all of you who are watching, my name is Peter Carlson. I am running for Board of Selectmen. Being a new candidate to the Board of Selectmen, I have over 15 years of municipal experience and leadership. I know where all the issues are in this town. I've been aware of them for many, many years, been accustomed to hearing this from the community, not only from school-age parents, but also from the rest of the community when it comes to capital, in regards to people working in municipal center. I feel that with my background that I have demonstrated leadership for this position. I believe that if I'm elected, you will see the same type of leadership that you've seen me on the school committee. Very collegial, very welcoming, very inclusive, not afraid to ask difficult questions, and not afraid to speak my mind when I feel something is important to do so. So again, I ask for your vote on May 21st. Please vote for Peter Carlson for Selectman. Thank you.
Mrs. DeFazio, please proceed.
Thank you, Bob. Again, thank you for setting up the debate this evening, Bob, and GCTV, and thank you to both my colleagues for having this be a contested race. It's been a pleasure. And my name is Doreen DeFazio. I'm running for Board of Selectmen, and I gave a little bit of my background earlier, just saying that I grew up in this town. I'm passionate about this town, like my colleagues are. And I have this focus in order to listen and collaborate with people on every board or committee I've been in, and I would continue to do that on the Board of Selectmen. I have about 15 years municipal experience, both working in the town of Grafton at a capacity. You may remember me from the recycling committee and the pay-as-you-throw days, and then moved on to get my master's in public administration and have worked for other communities around Massachusetts. And so I have an understanding of how municipalities work, working with other boards and committees around Massachusetts. And I want to keep Grafton affordable for all of its residents. So that's one of my goals. And retaining and attracting businesses of all sizes, preserving Grafton's character, and adopting sustainable practices. So those are the things that are really important to me. But I think most important is I have this desire to be a public servant for my hometown. And I have the skill set and the experience necessary to do that. And I have the time and able to put forward
10 seconds.
to do a good job in this role. So please vote for me on May 21st. Thank you.
Mr. Hanna, please proceed.
My name's Sargon Hanna, and again, thank you, Bob. Thank you, GCTV. Thank you, Jack and Bill over there in the back. I ask for your vote on May 21st. I will continue serving my town to the best of my ability if elected, and with honesty and integrity. I will make sure Grafton operates efficiently and progressively. I will continue working on economic development initiatives. We will have to make some tough decisions next year, and I will always review the information. And you can count on that fact that before I do make any decisions, I will always review my information, listen to my constituents, my fellow board members, and then make my decision. I take every decision before me seriously and have the whole town's interest at heart when doing so. 3 years ago when I ran, I wanted to make Grafton a town where our schools receive proper funding, our seniors are taken care of, and our residents were not taxed out of the town. I keep that statement in the back of my head with every decision I make. So you can count on me to continue serving my town in that way with honesty and transparency and inclusiveness. And I'll always answer questions to the best of my ability, not afraid to ask the tough questions, and I'm certainly not afraid to speak my mind. So you'll always get that out of me. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for taking part in tonight's debate. I enjoyed it. It was a little bit of a bump in the beginning, but we recovered pretty quickly, right? So you have been watching the Grafton Candidates for Selectmen Debate 2019 edition. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the candidates for coming in, and I'd like to thank the staff who helped make this production possible. They include John Kelly, who was operating the cameras, and of course everyone knows Bill Robidoux in the booth, who had the chores of directing for tonight's program.